Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Able Voices podcast. I'm Dr. Rhoda Bernard, founding managing director of the Berklee Institute for Accessible Arts Education and the assistant chair of the music education department at Berklee College of Music. And I am proud to present this podcast featuring disabled artists and arts educators. We are inviting artists with disabilities to be guest hosts for the Able Voices podcast. Today, you'll meet our next guest host, Tony Memmel. Tony Memmel is a singer, songwriter, speaker, and teacher with unique charisma and creativity. Though he was born with one hand, he taught himself to play the guitar professionally by building a special cast that he designed out of guerrilla tape. He has toured 47 of the 50 states, 25 countries, and has worked with 16 countries, virtually sharing his music and his message of hard work, determination, and resilience. His work ranges from visiting schools, hospitals, and churches to writing and arranging music for children, composing symphonies, performing in historic concert venues, and helping people with hand and limb differences, like his, to develop their own adaptive methods that allow them to make music part of their lives. Tony grew up in... Oh, I can't say that, Tony. Where did you grow up?
Waukesha, Wisconsin.
Thank you. Waukesha, Wisconsin, and now resides in Nashville, Tennessee with his wife and 2 sons. He enjoys playing basketball, swimming, hiking, and cooking, and trying new foods, especially if hot sauce is involved.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Able Voices Pod. My name is Tony Memmel, guest hosting today. And so glad to be joined today by my friend Deb, who does amazing things as an advocate and educator in this community. Once again, just as your guest host, I'll just introduce myself and then we'll get to know Deb throughout the whole rest of the pod here today. But I am Tony Memmel, singer, songwriter, speaker, and teacher. I travel all over the world making music for people. I've been to 47 of the 50 states and to 26 countries around the world, sharing music and a message. I was born with one hand and taught myself to play guitar adaptively by building a special tool out of a really tough, extra strong tape called guerrilla tape. And with that song, with the songs that I have, and with that story, I get out on the road all year long, trying to encourage people in their own pursuits, thinking about their own gifts and talents and abilities, and how to think uniquely and creatively about challenges and that they may face in their own journeys. And today I'm so glad to be joined by my friend Deb, because what I see in Deb is somebody who has a similar heart for encouraging people to find unique and creative ways to make music possible in their lives. So I want to introduce you to Deb. Deb, would you say hello and just tell our audience today about what you do as an educator and where you teach and where are you based?
Great. Well, Tony, thank you. Thank you for inviting me today. I'm really happy to be on the podcast and talk about this. Adaptive music education is probably one of my favorite topics in the whole world to talk about. So currently, I am assistant professor of special education at Northern Kentucky University. I took that position after I started my career as a piano teacher and music teacher a long time ago. And over the course of building our family, my husband and I made the decision to adopt 3 children with disabilities. We had two boys by birth, and then we decided to adopt 3 children and got involved in the world of disability and adoption advocacy at that point. Along the way, I switched over to special education and I got a master's in multicultural special education and went back to teaching in the schools as a special educator. And I did that for a number of years and kind of progressed up through the ranks of that and ended up as an instructional coach while I was working on a PhD in education and social change, focusing on inclusion practices and of students with extensive support needs, and then transitioned into this job as a professor at NKU. And along the way, as a music teacher, as you can imagine, our expectation in our family was that all of our children would learn how to play instruments. And our first daughter that we adopted, Anna, was born with one arm and some differences with her legs that resulted in needing to use a prosthetic leg. So when she was little and she was about 3, she saw her brothers playing piano and she just assumed that she was going to play the piano too, just like she did everything else they did. And so I began the process of adapting my instruction for one-handed piano. And that is really how I got started in this whole adaptive music movement, was with her. I had never done anything adaptively. I taught music in the schools and had inclusive classes because of the schools that I taught in. So I had taught students with disabilities before, but they did not have physical disabilities. This was something that was different. And she really wanted to play those. So piano was my main instrument. After I had stopped teaching in the schools, I opened my own music studio for a lot of years when I was raising my children and working as a disability and adoption advocate. So it was a natural place for us to start. And so around the same time, my very close friend Jennifer Petrie came into town to visit with her new daughter that they had adopted, who had been born without arms. And we had not actually been in communication for a few years because we just kind of drifted. We had been college roommates, and then she took a job on the West Coast and then moved to the East Coast, and I'm in Ohio. Cincinnati is near northern Kentucky. And so we just got together to have lunch or something and just discovered that we both had children with missing limbs, and just kind of were surprised that we had both followed the same path independently, but we had, and started talking about she had started adapting instruction for her daughter to play cello with her feet because her daughter had no arms. And so as we began to discuss, we kind of got back together again a few times, and we started to realize that perhaps through our experiences as both music educators and musicians and parents of children with limb differences, we had a skill set that we could share with other children. And so that's when we started talking about, and we launched our first version of Cincinnati Adaptive Music Camp.
Yeah. Oh, what an amazing story. I want to just back up a little bit. What was the original spark after having 2 children by birth to, like, what was on your heart that, inspired the decision to adopt, 3 children who had disabilities? Was it your time in the schools, or did something else kind of shape that decision?
So, really, it was our faith that led us there. So, we've both my husband and I are very intentional in how we live out our faith. And so this was just another area where we always decided to go prayerfully forward. And as we did, we just really felt like it was an outgrowth of our faith to bring in children that were waiting for families, as opposed to, having more children biologically. And we just, as the more we researched it, the more we realized, marriage is a relationship of promise and commitment, and that parenting would be no different. And so we decided at the same time to our son, our youngest son, who is number 2 in our birth order. He was diagnosed in utero as having some kind of difference with his brain that we did not know what that difference was going to be. And to the degree where we did not know if he was even going to live past birth, it was a big mysterious, we used to refer to it as the bump. Even doctors didn't know what it was. So we were very prepared to handle special needs because of that time, that through that pregnancy. And he was born, and it was a very benign difference that he was born with, and it was corrected when he was an infant, and it had no impact on him whatsoever. But when we went into adoption, we realized we had emotionally and mentally prepared ourselves for a special need. So we felt very comfortable saying that we could take on something, a situation where a child might be passed over by other people who hadn't gone through just the thought processes that we had about raising a child with a disability.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for sharing that with us. And so you talked about how that looked like for teaching Anna on piano when she was first getting started, your daughter Anna. But what about your other daughters? What kind of instruction were you kind of learning to teach them through the home with that expectation that we do music in this family? What kind of early adaptations were you coming up with and creating to help music be possible in their lives? And if you're willing, share what their differences are and disabilities are as well, so that we can kind of see your thought process there.
Sure. So our middle daughter, Saya, has bilateral radial club hand, and which means that she has shortened forearms and missing radial bones, and she has 4 fingers on each hand with very, very limited range of motion and very limited strength in them. And I started her on piano when she was about 5, and she didn't really have a strong interest in it. And it was more difficult to adapt things for her because she didn't have that finger strength or independence that Anna had, even though she had more fingers. And so she actually she did piano with me. She studied piano with me for until she was in about, I think it was 4th grade, and she decided she wanted to play the trumpet. And so we got her a trumpet and a private trumpet teacher, and she managed that quite well. But quickly we realized that the cornet was more suited towards her hands. And so we ended up buying a cornet for her, which worked really well. We ended up fusing, there was one part for just the tuning slide that we had to have something attached to so that she could manage it on her own. But that was probably the easiest adaptation ever, to just put a cornet in her hand. She held it slightly differently because she has the only 4 fingers and the shape of her hand. She uses both hands to hold it. And she, I believe, used maybe 2 fingers to push down the middle valve. But really, she played for years going into high school. She was section leader in her band. She marched up early and started a marching band in 8th grade as an 8th grader, and went on to do years with marching band as a section leader in a band that was a marching band that won state awards and regional awards all the time. Loved it. It was a great development for her social development, for her confidence, and all of that. She ended up, though she still plays her cornet sometimes. She went on to get a Bachelor of Fine Arts and with an emphasis in ceramics and painting. And she is now a professional ceramicist and artist in residence at a clay studio in Cincinnati.
Wow, cool.
So her art journey started with music, but really went more towards the fine arts. Although the one summer at camp, she did take guitar with you, Tony.
I remember.
And
I've had the
that
joy
was
of teaching
really,
2 of your children, and I was kinda hoping that, we could get to that as well, 'cause,
yeah,
it's been neat to see them grow, knowing you for a long time, but to see the way that music has worked through their lives and the different things that they were able to get access to and to try by having, a parent and then hopefully teachers around them who saw potential
yes.
and creative ways to make things possible, to look for the possible. And I want to talk about your other daughter as well, but that's one thing that just as we break this down a little bit, I noticed 2 things that you described in your kind of it. You might not have even been thinking of it as a method at the time, but you were
Mhm.
kind of already adapted piano to one-handed instruction for Anna, and then you were thinking about adapting the instrument itself for Insaya's situation. What other kind of, if those are kind of two lanes that you can look at as a somebody who's trying to help somebody to make music possible, are there other lanes that you've pursued as well, or are those kind of the
Oh
2
yeah.
main
Oh yeah.
areas that you focus on?
Well, jumping ahead a little bit to CAMAC, actual or CAMC, the camp. Actually, when we set the camps up, we set them up to be able to collect data on what we were doing as far as adapting instruction for our different students. And out of that evolved a template as kind of a way and a manner to go ahead and approach adaptive instruction. And I called those music adaptation plans or maps. And we used a very basic format during the early years of the camp. And we did look at different lanes we called them domains of consideration, is what I called them. So we want to look at, first of all, how is this student going to connect to the instrument? So, in short, what part of their body is going to be used to play that instrument? Because when we're talking about adapting physically, it's not going to be the same. Sometimes it's going to be feet. Sometimes it's going to be certain fingers. Sometimes it might be a residual limb, right? And so we have to determine first what part of them is going to connect to that instrument. And once we've done that, then we can look at the position of the instrument, the position of the musician, and then we can also look at, do we need to adapt the instrument in any way? Do we need to provide any kind of supportive devices to the instrument? And then finally, we can look at, are there any curriculum things that need to change with how we go about teaching the instrument? And what I found after going back and analyzing all of these maps that I had that we'd collected over the 5 years of camp, what I found is it's not always the same answer for every instrument and every student. But if we consider all these domains, it gives us a method for how
Hmm.
we're going about it. So, for instance, piano very rarely requires an adaptive device of any kind attached to the instrument or special stand. The exception might be if we need to figure out a way for a student to pedal if they
Hmm.
don't have their feet. For instance, my daughter Anna, when she played, did get to the point where she pedaled and we ended up working with May We Help, which is a local engineering volunteer charity. And they designed a device that came up from the pedal, it attached to the pedal, came out, followed the keyboard, went out to the left, came up and came back, and then came over. And she could pedal with her shoulder
Hmm.
because the bar had to be out of the way for her hand to clear the keyboard, but it had to connect with her shoulder was what was available to pedal. But that is when you're getting into something more complex. For most children you're going to adapt piano for, you're really adapting the music
Yeah.
so that they can play it with one hand. As opposed to, say, somebody who is playing maybe guitar and they need a stand to hold the guitar in a certain position. Like when you taught Anna guitar, it's changing the position so the guitar faced her and she strummed with her feet and then she fingered the chords with her left hand. I'm sorry, not her left hand with the guitar facing her. Well, she needed a stand to
Yeah.
do that, right? So it just, every single student, we're not going to have one universal design for how anything is going to work because each of these students have unique bodies and each of these instruments have unique capabilities. We also, if you remember, with Anna, you ended up doing a different tuning system with
Mhm.
her as well. So those are all the changes to the instrument. That's a change to the instrument. Sometimes we would restring a cello backwards because of range of motions. Again, a change to the instrument. So there are, in each of these domains, just considerations that can kind of guide the teacher.
Yeah, yeah. Is there a place that you specifically start when you're working with a new student who comes to you, or like, do you start with the instrument itself? Do you start with the teaching method? Do you start with the, you know, what is? If I'm just trying to get you to explain to somebody who's maybe like sitting down with a student for the first time, like walk them through your brain. Like, what would you be considering?
Sure.
Do you consider like cost, accessibility to the like items? Not everybody will have like an engineering team with them, maybe, but like, how could you get somebody started in adaptive music instruction if they had somebody come to their studio or classroom?
So the first thing I always look at, and I've actually been working on more of a universal intake form for teachers to use, but what I typically do is I start by looking at what can the student do. So if they're coming to me directly, and this is not the camp setup where we offer multiple instruments, and this is just me as a piano teacher, I look at what they're capable of doing, and I don't entirely go off of what they say because I found they kind of come in with preconceived notions of what their body needs to do. And so I always want to listen to what they're saying, but I also just kind of watch, and we will kind of play around with the piano a little bit, and I'll just have them hit random keys and watch for range of motion, like how much range of motion do they have. I look for finger strength. I just look for all of those things. And for instance, I recently worked with an adult student who was able to use his left hand, was completely unaffected by his disability, but his right hand was impacted, and he did not think he could use his right hand at all. And in general, he was right. However, I know the way it sat next to the piano when he sat there, he could use it for accent notes
Hmm.
if he wanted to, you know. And so it's more of an asset than he actually realizes
Hmm.
it is. And so I look at that. I look at range of motion, strength, things like that, and then again, and then use that information to determine how are they going to connect to the instrument.
Yeah.
And then if I see, like, okay, they need to sit at a certain height or they need to sit at a certain angle, then I look at, do I need to change their positioning? Do I need to change the instrument's position?
Yeah, for sure. I'm curious about that because I think as an adaptive music instructor myself, I've never taken what I just instinctively do in my own brain and like written it out for somebody else to understand or learn, which is something that I think is really cool that you're working to do, is to come up with these ways. That's one of the most asked questions that I get about this particular topic is like, how can I, when somebody comes to my classroom, help somebody come in? And then I'll walk them through if they're doing a ukulele lesson as a group or a guitar lesson as a group, like the first things that I'm looking at are like, yeah, what hand can they hold the guitar with if they have
Mhm.
one? What how many digits do they have, if any? And what does the guitar have to go on the ground in front of them and be supported by some sort of tool or device? But kind
Mhm.
of the kind of quick thinking things that you do as somebody who's worked at this for a long time that can be broken down for somebody who's maybe experiencing it for the first time as an educator, I think will be a super helpful tool. Are any of those resources available yet for people to see or have if they were curious and wanted to know about it?
So I've got some articles that are under review in different academic journals, and there is on the OMI website the presentation that I did with Jennifer Petrie at the last conference, and I think that the maps are available on there. Also, if you connect with me at info at the adaptive arts and music project.org, I am happy to send a blank map template to anybody who asks for it that can help guide them in that.
Cool. That's awesome. And that's a really good segue too into talking about camp. And I would like to look at this from a couple of different angles because you and Jennifer, as the founders of the camp, your children made up some of the student body as well. And you've talked through like how you brought music into your homes. What did it look like from what was you talked about it briefly, but what did it take to go from dream, this would be really cool to do kind of conversation into like,
Mhm.
we're doing it? And what did that look like?
Oh, it was something else, let me tell you. The learning curve was steep. It was very steep, because we realized pretty quickly we were trying to do something that nobody had ever done before, and so there were just a lot of things we didn't know. But at the time, I was working on my master's at it's now Mount St. Joseph University, and my advisor there was like, "Hey, if you want to try to do this, go ahead and you can use the school building. You know, we're happy to let you use it for free." And which was very helpful. And we both had people that had just reached out to us independently just because we were known professionally, as music teachers, and also in the disability community because I had done like some writing and advocacy work and things like that over the years. So we started very small with just offering piano and strings.
Mm,
And we thought if we could get just, a handful of students, if they come into town, the parents are just going to have to figure out housing. We can't do all of that, but we'll put together a fun week of camp for the students. And so that's what we did the first year, very small, and we were surprised that we did have parents come into town for it, even though we were not well organized by any stretch of the imagination. And we had not advertised a lot or anything like that. The need was there. And so these parents were willing to drive or fly to get that type of education for their child because they hadn't been able to find it,
Mhm.
which really spoke volumes to us as to how big of a gap this was in
Yeah.
instruction.
Yeah, and how much, that access means to people, like, at the camps that I've participated in, people came from around the country to participate as students with their travel with their family to come be a part of it, made it part of their summer vacation even in some circumstances, to build, seeing a little bit of Cincinnati into, a visit to work with an instructor who believes in you and what you can do as a student, sees that potential. So how did I think I taught at the camp for 2 summers. It moved
Mhm.
from you say St. Joseph's is what it's called now?
Yeah, Mount St. Joseph
Mount St.
University.
Joseph's to, Xavier was the second
Yes.
campus, I believe, and,
Mhm.
now this year, to kind of catch us up in time, it's gonna be in an even a new location. So just as somebody who's organizing something, who's starting something from scratch, who's being scrappy, who's on a budget, how did you move from your first location to your second location to your third location, and what's that story like?
So, after our first year, we stayed at Mount St. Joseph for I think the next few years just because it was free and we needed free. But
Free is
as we had
good.
more people interested from different places, we had a couple reasons we switched. We weren't able to work with Mount St. Joseph for housing, and it became very apparent to us and became even more apparent to us down the road that having everybody in one place built a sense of community. That a part of the park, Jennifer and I are we're very teacher focused and we're very, high quality education focused. And so sometimes the social components of things kind of fly right past us at first. And we started to realize that sense of community, if we could all be together for the week and be staying in the same place, was really valuable for the campers and their parents. And and so because we weren't able to work with Mount St. Joseph on that, we checked in with Xavier, which was just another. We looked at different locations around the city at the time, and Xavier presented as the best option for that at the time. So we switched to Xavier and found pretty quickly that it really made a huge difference because, the children have time to build relationships with each other in the evenings and do fun things in the evenings. And the parents have time to talk to each other and build those relationships and have those conversations that are really valuable
Yeah.
for them. So we ended up having to shut everything down just because we were hitting a point in our parenting where we had a whole bunch of teenagers and they all needed driven places and they all were, they're younger and you can kind of tell them what they're going to do, but they get older and they all decide they have their own interests, so they're not all doing the same thing, and things just got complex. So we did have to close it down. And then a couple years ago, Jennifer and I were talking. We're both at a place where we were like, we could relaunch this,
Mhm.
and we could relaunch this with a heavier research focus, with the purpose of which we always had the purpose of trying to collect best practices and make this replicable, but with a really strong focus on how do we do that this time. And because I'm a professor at NKU, I really felt like this might be a good place to hold it. And the thing that is wonderful about NKU is we have a School of the Arts there. So that School of the Arts, all of the arts programming is in one building. And as we talked about rebranding the camp and rebranding the adaptive music project and what we wanted to do, we really realized we really wanted to expand and we wanted to start including other forms of art. And so that's when we decided to rename our project, which it's now the Adaptive Arts and Music Project, and to rename the camp to reflect that change that we're expanding into the other arts. So this year, we are expanding into ceramics and painting. And actually, my daughter, Saya, who is a professional ceramicist, and will be leading the art portion of the camp. So that will be for students who are not interested in specializing in music, but are really interested in going deeper on pottery, sculpture, and painting
Mhm.
for the week. And And so because it's a school of the arts, it's got all the different types of rooms and buildings all in one building. And our hope down the line is that we will add a drama portion to this and a dance portion and really expand the arts, not to just be music and visual
Yeah.
arts. And so that was part of the thinking with moving it to NKU as well. And along that line, we are also hoping it will not be this summer. I'm hoping it'll be the following summer to offer a teacher training track
Oh, love
at
it.
the camp.
That's cool. I love it. I think it's really important to point out here a few things that this is like over a decade in the making. That at that point, when as you're mapping this out, I hope people will take note of that you didn't go into this with every single thing figured out, but you had a goal, you had a vision, you saw a need, and you started somewhere. And then over time, it's had this growth. You've grown as a teacher yourself and as a professional, and you kind of see these other ways that the camp can support people and help that weren't maybe even a part of the original vision or even possible in the original vision. Another thing that I wanted to point out as well was when you said the importance of community, there was a marked difference as an instructor at the Xavier camp when I had the chance to teach at that one, having the dorm life experience, witnessing that for the students and their families. They're playing soccer at night and hanging out, snacking and talking and just getting this community built around music, which is something that music and the arts are really all about. I mean, I can think of so many friends, colleagues, professional relationships. Like it spans like so many realms of my social life that all started somewhere. Being in a choir, playing in a band. That are some of the most important relationships in my life, and so that's really an amazing transition from not being able to even be in the same space, being in the same space, to now being in a new campus with kind of this even vision for growth over the next few years. And if people want to learn more about this camp and the work that you're doing, or they have a student in their classroom who they think might benefit, or they hear this about the teacher track that you're thinking of envisioning, and they want to reach out to you about that, you just you launched a new website, didn't you? That has
Yes.
that's going to be having information added to it.
Yes.
Will you talk about that process? I mean, there's people probably who have similar ideas or visions and like don't know the first thing about starting a website. So like, tell us about the website and what are some of those things that went into making this possible this year?
So the website is the adaptiveartsandmusicproject.org. And right now it has got a homepage and an announcement about camp. And that's about it. Although we're working on adding more content. We'll be adding a Meet the Team page soon. And ultimately, what we really want with that is that to be a repository of open source information for people. It will have information. We would really love to build a network of teachers who are comfortable teaching adaptively. We would like to add research as our research is published, links to that, as well as we're working with May We Help, which is a big component of the camp. And I should have mentioned this earlier. One of the benefits that we've had for the camp is that in Cincinnati, there is a charity called May We Help, which organizes predominantly engineers, but anyone engineering, tinkering, interested in making kind of makerspace kind of movement, they organize them to do volunteer work for people with physical disabilities. So we partner with them, and that's how we're able to develop these custom solutions so quickly that week of camp because of that organization and the resources that they have, the workshop and the engineers and the volunteer pool that they have, which is obviously an advantage we have in Cincinnati that is not replicated elsewhere. And so we are hoping to merge that website with theirs and make the plans all open source so people can get them. The issue is always going to be there is not going to be one universal cello stand. There's not going to be one universal bow hold or guitar stand. But there's no reason to reinvent the wheel each and every time. And if we can see what other people have done, then we can build off those things or adapt them. And so that is our that's our hope with that. And starting the website, we just really, this has been a very grassroots effort. That was, this is passion work, and it has come out of our pockets.
Yeah.
My husband has helped me with designing it and getting it out there. So everything we've done has been very much self-initiated.
Yeah. That's great.
So,
I think that's so important just to emphasize, like your background is not in designing a website, but this is the need and the way you're going to be able to guide people to the work that you do. I think is really cool that you're figuring it out, as you go, and that's such a big part of this. And just to describe the, you could probably talk all day about this. I know we're running against time here, but does the camp cater most of the differences, disabilities that you've described today are physical in nature? Is the camp, this year or in future iterations of it, going to cater to people with intellectual, emotional disabilities as well? Things that type of students is the camp able to help in 2026?
so we have thought long and hard about our focus with this camp, because both Jennifer and I are by nature and by purpose very inclusive in everything that we do. We really want the camp to focus on physical disabilities right now because that is the niche that we're able to fill that's unique within that camp.
Mhm.
That said, we are not, disabilities are concomitant often. And so we are certainly not going to turn away a student because they have a physical disability and an intellectual disability, or a physical disability and autism. We are are open and welcoming to everyone who would apply. The benefit from the camp right now is going to come from for people with physical disabilities, both children and adults. We are open to adults as well because we found many have not had access to music instruction, or if they have had some kind of traumatic accident or illness that has changed their body, they may not have had access. So we are open to adults as well. Um, Ultimately, we'd love to see the camp spread even more into those areas of intellectual disability and autism. But for right now, we are keeping that focus there
Yeah.
as just our main focus. But I say that saying we don't want somebody to not apply
Mhm.
for the camp because their child has a limb difference and an intellectual disability. Like let's look at what's in the best interest of the child and what's the best interest in the way of connecting them with adaptive instruction. Because we're certainly not going to turn somebody away
Yeah.
because of that. And we have talked through too, as far as physical disabilities, we are not at the point where we're offering any kind of eye gaze technology.
Mhm.
That is really something that I would love to see us branch out into and is on the short list of areas to branch out. Because I think the camp format could be a great way to introduce somebody to that,
Yeah.
right? And give them a week to work on it to be able to figure out how to use it and if they're able to use it and if it's worth, for them to invest long term in that.
Yeah.
But we're not there yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. That is so cool. I love hearing that vision for the future and all the things that you're working on. And just to put a period, an exclamation point on this great talk today,
Mhm.
tell us the website one last time, and then what is your best piece of advice for a teacher who is going to be working with an adaptive student, maybe for the first time coming up, and what would be the first piece of encouragement or advice that you would give to somebody who is going to be working with this amazing community for the first time?
Sure. So again, the website is theadaptiveartsandmusicproject.org. And the advice I always give people is none of us know what we're doing. So it's okay. Go ahead and try things. Even as a special education professor, I tell my students all the time it is okay when we teach and our students fail at something because everybody fails.
Mhm.
And people with disabilities are able to try things and not be able to do them, but they need to be able to try things. And So what we want to do is just make failure a part of learning
Mhm.
and to keep trying and think outside the box. So I really encourage if somebody's thinking about, that type of teaching or considering a student to just go for it and just figure it out because that is in everybody's best interest to do that. And we don't know what they're going to figure out on their own. One thing I've learned from working with people with physical disabilities is they are very intuitive about how to use their bodies. Like a lot of times more intuitive, I feel like, at least than I am with my own. And I suspect that many people who have typically performing bodies are,
Mhm.
because a lifetime of that adaptive thinking has made them more intuitive
Yeah,
to how they can use their bodies. They're more tuned into it. And to not be afraid to go with that.
that is awesome. Thank you so much, Deb. That's so insightful. This has been so good to talk with you today. Thank you for being a guest on the Able Voices pod. Again, this is Deb Amon, and you can find her on the website, and we hope that you'll check it out. It's a really awesome project that they're working on, and the camp is resuming this year. So check it out, and they're doing amazing things. Thank you, Deb.
Thank you, Tony.
Able Voices is a production of the Berklee Institute for Accessible Arts Education, led by me, Dr. Rhoda Bernard, the founding managing director. It is produced by Daniel Martinez del Campo. The intro music is by Kai Levin, and our closing song is by Sebastian Batista. Kai and Sebastian are students in the arts education programs at the Berklee Institute for Accessible Arts Education. If you would like to learn more about our work, find us online at berkeley.edu/BIAAE or email us at BIAAE@berkeley, that's LEE.edu.